So do we have all the participants?
Right. I think so.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Sorry to all for the, I would say, IT glitch. We're happy to get together again for this Fidelia webinar series. I'm Serge Ferrari from the group in Geneva, where Sarah Delon works, and Nicolas Bonnet will present today. Is a co-director on our side of the project. So Nicolas Bonnet, whom you probably know, obtained his PhD from the University of Orléans in 2006, interested already back there in the effects of exercise and the beta-adrenergic system on bone. Then he joined our research lab of bone disease at the Geneva University Hospital in 2007, where he spent more than 10 years, actually I think something like 12 years, first of all pursuing his investigations on the molecular mechanism of transduction from mechanical loading on bone, and then developed a keen interest in understanding the relationship between bone and energy metabolism, and has started a number of collaborations with some other researchers in the field at the Geneva Diabetes Research Center. So Nicolas then has moved at Nestlé as a director of research, but he keeps, of course, a great interest in this topic. And today, Nicolas, you're going to speak to us about the importance of energy metabolism on bone remodeling. Welcome to all, and we look forward to listen to your presentation, Nicolas.
Thank you, Serge, for this nice introduction. So, first of all, you will probably heard that my voice is a little bit broken, so sorry in advance if you don't heard all my wording. So, actually, yes, today I'm going to try to make an overview on how the systemic energy metabolism can control bone remodeling. So actually, I have split my presentation in two parts. The first part will be quick, and I will discuss about the definition of energy metabolism. Then I will show you a few examples of a link which have been already demonstrated at the clinical level between low energy availability and bone outcome. I will also say a few words about the importance of the type of fuels for bone cells. And then I will shift my presentation to how glucose control bone remodeling. And I will spend time on three different topics. The first one is how glucose impact bone cells from in vitro to preclinical model. And then I will probably focus much more on the importance of mitochondria function, both in osteoblast and osteoclast. And I will finish by a reminder, because we are working inside Fidelio on the bone fragility in type 2 diabetes. So first, the definition of energy metabolism. So actually, it's a process that underlines the food intake versus the burning of the food. And you have energy metabolism balance, which is reached when you have your dietary energy intake, which equal your energy expenditure. And actually, at the level of clinics, there is already have been demonstrated between low energy availability and a bone outcome, and I'm going to show you a few different examples. The first one is when you have a low food intake, which is the case in anorexia nervosa, which is well known to have been described to have a low bone mass, and one of the reasons which have been highlighted is a low level of IGF-1. There is another context of low energy availability, which is different than the one mentioned before with low food intake. And this is the one observed in different athletes that we call the triad of athlete, where actual expenditure is higher than the energy intake. And actually, we can be surprised that this low energy availability in athlete is not a rare situation, because it concerns 80 to 58%. And actually, in this triad, you have this trio of different features, which is the first one, the low energy, the second one, the low sex hormone level, and the last one, which is a low bone mass, and actually which have been demonstrated to increase the rate of injury by almost fourfold. Interestingly, the link between low energy availability and bone outcome had been confirmed at the preclinical level. First, through the caloric restriction model, which have demonstrated that it induces a decrease of bone structure, particularly at the level of the trabecular structure, as you can see here on those images. And interestingly, if you add energy expenditure by adding exercise in this caloric restriction model, which had no effect on the cortical compartment, you can see that when it's combined with exercise, you have a significant decrease or an alteration of the cortical compartment. Interestingly, a recent literature review have highlighted that low energy availability could explain the detrimental effect of exercise on bone outcome, which is sometimes described, and when I say sometimes, it's almost 20% of the cases at the preclinical level, which have investigated the effect of exercise. And you can see that this detrimental effect of exercise when you have a low energy availability is only seen when the exercise is like swimming, meaning that there is no weight-bearing bone, whereas when you have a resistance training with high mechanical loading, you do not observe this detrimental effect, suggesting that mechanical loading probably cover the detrimental effect implemented by the low energy availability. Interestingly, when you look to the guideline of energy availability, which is well described, even when it's the definition of the low energy availability, the reduced one, the optimal one, they are all linked to health benefit, which include also the bone outcome. However, it's interesting to note that there is no detrimental effect of high energy availability on bone per se. However, actually, when you focus not only on energy availability, but you focus mainly on the fuel which induce the high energy availability. And for example, when you look to the effect of high protein intake or high fat intake or high carbohydrate, you have some study which describe a negative impact on the bone tissue. So if you focus specifically on what are the different type of fuel on bone cells which are used, you can see that all the bone cells at the end express all the enzymes which are required for the fuel metabolism in order to perform the switch of the protein into amino acid, or the carbohydrate into glucose, or the fat into fatty acid. And interestingly, if you perform a literature research, you will see that there is some fuel preference regarding these different elements. And one of the fuel preference which pop up for the bone cell is glucose. And actually, it's interesting to see that particularly for osteoblast, glucose is one of the most important fuel independently of the stage of the differentiation, as you can see. So that's why I will focus now on how glucose impact bone cells. And actually, from a general point of view, glucose has a positive and or a negative effect on bone remodeling, depending on how glucose is used. When glucose is seen as a fuel, actually it has been demonstrated that it has positive effect on bone tissue, whereas when glucose is in excess, it is seen as a throwaway. So just to do a quick reminder before to go through the detail of my presentation on the glucose metabolism option. Actually, there is two possibilities for the glucose metabolism. There is one process which is anaerobic that we call glycolysis, and which produce a low amount of ATP per glucose, and particularly it produces only 2 ATP. And there is another process, which is an aerobic process, which goes through the mitochondria, and which is an oxidative phosphorylation process, and which is much more efficient compared to glycolysis, since it produces for the same amount of glucose 36 ATP. So first, glucose is seen as an important fuel, and there is a lot of demonstration on that. And the first one is the genetic demonstration that when you take the receptor you take out the receptor of glucose in osteoblast. Either it's the glucose transporter 1, which is insulin independent, or the glucose transporter 4, which is insulin dependent. You can see that almost all the osteoblastic marker, the osteogenetic marker, are decreased, and the main consequences is a decrease in alkaline phosphatase and in mineralization. Actually, it's exactly the same observation that is seen when you take out the receptor of insulin, specifically in osteoblast. You have a decrease of the marker of osteoblastogenesis, and the consequences is that when you take out the receptor of insulin with aging, you have a higher decrease of the trabecular structure compared to wild-type glutamate. Interestingly, it has been recently demonstrated that glucose is even more important considered as a fuel in response to mechanical loading. And actually, it's an in vitro demonstration where they applied an axial compression directly on osteoblast cells. And as you can see on this Western blot, you have a significant increase of the expression of the glucose transporter with mechanical loading. This is translated directly by an increase of bone formation. And what it's interesting is that when you use an agent which block the expression of the glucose transporter, you can see that you blunt the increase of bone formation in response to mechanical loading. And they conclude that actually, by doing this experiment, the glucose transporter can be considered as an energy sensor of mechanical loading in order to have the increase of bone formation in response to this stimulus. Of course, glucose has not always a positive impact, and there is an importance of a threshold. And you can see easily in vitro that below a certain threshold, if you continue to increase the level of glucose, you will have in osteoblast cell lines an increase of ALP and also an increase of mineralization. Whereas above a certain threshold, if you continue to increase this amount of glucose, you will see that you will decrease the level of ALP and you will decrease the level of mineralization, and therefore you will have an alteration of your bone structure. And actually, this observation is also true at the osteoclast level, where below a certain threshold, if you increase the amount of glucose, you will increase the osteoclast viability. You will also increase osteoclast activity, whereas above a certain threshold, if you continue to increase the amount of glucose, you will decrease the osteoclast viability and you will decrease the osteoclast activity. And actually, if you perform a review on how hyperglycemia impact the bone tissue, it is mainly through a vicious circle implying oxidative stress and inflammation, with really 3 different features which pop up. The first one is a decrease of the expression of glucose transporter, and I have already shown you some preclinical data which really confirm this link between the glucose transporter and the bone outcome. The second feature is an increase of the accumulation of AGs, and I will show you only 2 experiments which make the link between the accumulation of AGs and bone outcome. And there is a last feature which is really important for us now, which is the mitochondrial dysfunction, which actually through different ways can impact bone metabolism. So first, preclinical relevance that AGEs is really implicated in the deleterious effect of hyperglycemia, and this has been clearly demonstrated in a spontaneous diabetic Wistar rats model, where you can see that when with AGEs you have an increase of the hyperglycemia. This is well linked to a decrease of bone strength, which is independent of bone mineral density. And in this study, actually, they link this decrease of bone strength with the accumulation in the bone sample of AGEs and homocysteine. And then it has been described that actually AGEs and homocysteine decrease bone formation through a decrease in osteoblast differentiation, and also through a decrease of the expression of enzymatic collagen crosslink, and which secondarily alter the bone material properties. So now I would like to spend much more time on the third feature that I show you, which is the dysfunction of mitochondria and the link with bone fragility. Actually, there is in the past this experiment which have been performed and confirm the link between mitochondrial dysfunction and bone fragility, where they use actually a mouse model with mitochondrial mutation at the mitochondrial DNA, and they demonstrated that with aging, there is a significant decrease of the bone mineral density compared to the wild-type glutamate, and they clearly demonstrate that this decrease of bone mineral density was linked to a decrease of osteoblastogenesis and particularly decrease of mineralization at different stage. And therefore, they conclude that this model is really an accelerated model of osteoporosis. If we now go deeper in the important role of mitochondria in bone cells, and particularly here in osteoblast, there is already different study which suggest and highlight in osteoblast cell line, MC3T3, osteoblast cell line, that when you have an alteration of the mitochondria through pharmacological and or genetic alteration, you induce two important things. First, you increase the level of ROS that you can see here in green, and you decrease the amount of ATP, and this as a consequence induce a decrease of ALP and a decrease in mineralization. Interestingly, this observation has been also confirmed at the with human primary osteoblast coming from Leigh syndrome, where this patient has a mutation into the mitochondria, and again you can see that their osteoblasts produce much less ATP level, and therefore they have a decrease in ALP and a decrease in mineralization process. And this was just two different examples, but there is a lot of examples, and there is a recent review which clearly established that actually mitochondrial bioenergy is really important in osteoblastogenesis through different signaling pathway, which include previous signaling pathway that you all know, like SIRT1, IF, but particularly they clearly establish that osteoblastogenesis process is really dependent on a metabolic shift from glycolysis to oxidative phosphorylation, and this is really key and important. And actually, this brings to the next step that there could be some mitochondrial therapeutics opportunities for osteoblastogenesis by trying to boost mitochondrial oxidative phosphorylation. And I'm going to just show you two different examples of mitochondrial therapeutics. There is the resveratrol, which have been clearly demonstrated in SAPPESIS model, which is a model of aging induced by senescence, that resveratrol clearly boosts oxidative phosphorylation, and by boosting oxidative phosphorylation, it restores the level of ALP compared to a wild-type mice. There is the same observation with another agent, which is an activator of SIRT1, which is well known to increase the mitochondrial content. And you can see that in an aging mice model, aged of 36 months, actually this increases the level of ALP, and the consequence is a significant increase in the trabecular bone structure. So this link between mitochondria and osteoblast activity is also true at the level of the osteoclast. And actually, when you have a mitochondrial dysfunction, you have an impairment of osteoclastogenesis. And I'm just going to show you again a few examples. And there is this example where you have a deletion of the mitochondrial transcription factor A specifically in osteoclast, the consequences is that you have a decrease of the number of mitochondria in osteoclast, which decrease the amount of ATP which is produced, and the consequence is a significant decrease in osteoclast number. And when you do that specifically in osteoclast in a mouse model, actually you have a decrease of the growth due to this decrease of the osteoclast number. And actually they make the hypothesis that in an aging mice model, it would be probably induce osteopetrosis. Again, there is a lot of studies which are accumulating at that moment regarding the important role of mitochondria in osteoclastogenesis. And I would say that this study highlights that mitochondrial oxidative signaling really emphasize osteoclastogenesis. There is, of course, a specific focus which highlights the important role of FROS, but there is also important metabolites which are produced during the mitochondrial oxidative phosphorylation, which are like acetyl-CoA, aspartate, or NAD, which are able directly to impact signaling pathway of osteoclastogenesis. And when you show that, as for the osteoblast, I would like to show you that there is already some mitochondrial therapeutics in order to control osteoclastogenesis, which can be used. And this is one example with the cases of rotenone, which is a specific inhibitor of the mitochondrial complex 1, and therefore inhibit oxidative respiration. And as you can see through this dose response, you have a decrease in the number of osteoclasts. I would also mention an interesting observation with the short-chain fatty acid, which have been also clearly to increase glycolysis at the disadvantage of oxidative phosphorylation, since you can see the decrease in oxygen consumption rate here, which is clearly associated with the decrease of the number of osteoclasts. So, having shown you the important role of mitochondria either in osteoblast and in osteoclast, I just wanted to show you this table where there is, which highlight that there is already a lot of pharmacological reagent which target mitochondria and which have been used in a preclinical model with some bone outcome which have been demonstrated with positive impact. Of course, there is still some question which remains in order to use this mitochondrial agent or reagent, because as you have observed and understand, there is difference of the role of mitochondria between osteoblast and osteoclast. So there is this question which remains in that topic, that can we manipulate specifically or precisely the mitochondria per cell type, and this really remain a specific manner in order to try to restore mitochondrial function in osteoblast cells. Is there some clinical relevance of mitochondrial dysfunction and their link to bone fragility? Yes, there is some. I'm just going to show you two of them. The first one is coming from the Nurse Health Prospective study, where actually they have investigated biomarker of oxidative stress as baseline and investigate the association, the link with hip fracture incidence in postmenopausal women. And you can see that there is significant higher hazard ratio of hip fracture in the third tertile of this fluorescent oxidation production. There is another case control study which clearly directly link the mitochondrial dysfunction with bone fragility, and they use specifically 45 carriers which have a mutation in their mitochondria and characterize their bone health. And you can see that this carrier of the mutation compared to control have a lower bone mineral density at the hip and the femoral neck. They have an alteration of the cortical structure. They have an alteration of the trabecular structure. They have an increase of the cortical porosity, and this have been clearly demonstrated by HR-VQCT at the radius, but also at the tibia. Of course, they conclude that the role of mitochondria in bone cells per se is only one of the factors which explain the deleterious effect of the bone phenotype of this patient, since they have a lot of secondary outcome which can explain the deleterious effect of bone, but they clearly highlighted that the role of mitochondria in bone cell per se contribute to the decrease of the bone phenotype in this patient. So before to conclude on my talk, I would like to come back to the aim of Fidelio, which is to try to tackle bone fragility in type 2 diabetes. And as Professor Serge Ferrari have highlighted at the last webinar, actually it is well known that with type 2 diabetes linked to hyperglycemia, there is an increase of bone fragility when your glycemia is not well controlled compared to when in patient your glycemia is well controlled. And this increase of risk fracture is totally independent of the bone mineral density. But what I would like to mention here at the clinical level, that at the beginning of my talk, when I'm mention you the 3 different features which explain the effect of hyperglycemia at the preclinical level, which were the decrease in glucose transporter and the accumulation of AGs. At the level of the preclinics, there is already some demonstration which clearly shows that the accumulation with AGs in type 2 diabetes patient is linked to a decrease in trabecular bone structure. And also there is also other study which clearly demonstrated that when you have an increase of AGs, you have an increase of a fracture risk with an alteration of the bone material properties per se. However, at that level of today, the link between hyperglycemia and bone fragility in type 2 diabetes through the alteration of mitochondrial dysfunction have not been well investigated. And it's for sure for me really an important topic that I would like to focus and highlight today. So instead of making a complicated conclusion, the take-home message of my presentation of today was to just say that bone is not only an aggregate of calcium and phosphate, as it has been done for the energy metabolism field. It is important to take into account the energy that you provide to your bone cells and the energy that is used by the bone cells. And I would like to perform a parallel between this balance of energy metabolism and the well-known balance of bone remodeling that you all know between osteoblast and osteoclast, and that for sure the fuel source, either glucose, fatty acid, and amino acid, which drive the level of ATP, have a key role in order to maintain bone homeostasis in this feature, and this is probably particularly true in type 2 diabetes. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I remain for your question.